If you love Shakespeare and his tragedies and you really want to explore a lesser known play, then today's book just might be for you. Today I will be reviewing Cymbeline by William Shakespeare. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today, definitely one of the more obscure Shakespeare plays, possibly the most obscure Shakespeare play. The full title of it is The Tragedy of Cymbeline, or Cymbeline, King of Britain. And just to give you a quick synopsis, this is what happens in, and I apologize in advance if I say any of the names incorrectly. This is not only one of the lesser known plays, I read it, and so some of the pronunciations are probably not particularly authentic, and I hope to get a chance to maybe see this play, and so maybe I can correct those in the future. But just to give you an idea, this play opens up. Cymbeline is the king of Britain. He's meant to be a Celtic king, which means that he is a great enemy of the Romans, which will come into play later. And in the beginning, he actually discovers that his daughter Imogen has secretly been wed to a commoner named Posthumus Leonidas. And you actually discover this because he has a stepson, Cloten, who is trying to woo Imogen. And so when Imogen says, no, I can't because I'm already married, and all this comes out, the king is very upset and he banishes Posthumus to Italy. He makes him leave. And so that's what he does. He goes to Italy where he meets Iachimo. And Iachimo is this real machismo man that thinks that he can woo anyone. Of course, Posthumus is bragging about the fidelity of his wife, and Iachimo takes that as a challenge. He says, oh, I can go and I can seduce your wife if you're so convinced that she'll be faithful to you when you're here in banishment. So then Act 2 is Iachimo going and trying to seduce Imogen. Of course, she's faithful, so he's very unsuccessful. So instead what he does is he makes up this plan to sneak into the bedroom and to steal a bracelet of hers. And while he's in there, he actually happens to see her naked and sees that she has a mole on her breast. And so he knows that that is something he can use to try and convince Posthumus that he was able to seduce her. And so he goes back and he tells Posthumus that he was successful, and he shows him the bracelet, but above all, he even says that he could identify that mole. Posthumus is enraged, he's upset, and he decides to send his servant Pisanio to go and kill Imogen. But when Pisanio gets there, he of course takes sympathy on Imogen and refuses to kill her. Instead, he helps her to escape. He actually dresses her up as a boy who he names Fidele, which is a pun, and it is a play on this whole premise that of being faithful and not, and Fidele meaning faithful. And she is going to escape, and she is going to actually encounter a banished nobleman, Belarius, who's living in a cave with his two sons. They're actually the sons of Cymbeline. They are the sons of Cymbeline that Belarius had kidnapped when they were infants. In Act 4, Cloten, the stepbrother that had tried to marry Imogen, he pursues her. He's hoping that he can still convince her that she should marry him and forget her husband that is living in Italy now that he's banished and everything. And so he's actually going to show up at the cave where he will be killed by one of Belarius's sons. This is going to greatly upset Imogen because of a misunderstanding. She actually thinks that Posthumus is dead, and so she's going to go into the cave and she's going to renounce basically everything in life, and it's this really dramatic moment where she just thinks all is lost. But there's Act 5, and in Act 5 the Romans are going to attack the British, and Posthumus, who is now really regretting his rashness and his decision to have Imogen killed, because of course he thinks that his servant was successful, he decides that he needs to go and he needs to fight for Britain in disguise, because again, that's a recurring theme in Shakespearean plays. And so he does. The British win, and Posthumus is actually captured. And the play is going to end when, after a lot of discussion and dialogue, everything is eventually going to finally be revealed, and all of the either misunderstandings, the difference of opinions about marrying commoners are all going to be resolved, and Cymbeline and Posthumus and Imogen are all going to actually reconcile. And so it actually has a rather happy ending, which is surprising for a Shakespearean tragedy. And that's one of the issues that people have with this play, and it might be one of the reasons why it's not a particularly well-known Shakespearean play, because even though just like any Shakespeare play, there's a lot to engage with, especially the language, the little quips and sayings, some of which I think this may be the very first time they're said. I'm not entirely sure. But all that is going to be offset by the fact that the tone is not entirely true to tragedy, because it has this general reconciliation at the end, and everyone gets together and you don't have a whole lot of deaths like you have in basically every other Shakespeare tragedy. So I think that might be one of the reasons why it's not as well known as some of the other tragedies, because like I said, I do think that the language and the storyline are very much engaging. It's nice and complicated, just like most of Shakespeare's play, although it's not overly complicated. I do think that there can be times when it can be a little more challenging to understand a Shakespeare play simply because so much is going on. I didn't really find that to be the case with this one. But just to give you an idea of some of the good quotes that I saw in here, and a couple, I think these, if they're not the first time they're said, I think this at least helped to popularize them. So there's one point where they say, "The game is up." There's another point where they say, "I have not slept a wink." There's another one where they say he played judge, executioner, all himself. So you can see how those are related to more common idioms nowadays. But on top of that, it's Shakespeare. It's just beautiful. I think one of the recurring themes is this idea of our own mortality and just how finite life is. And so there's two that I highlighted that I really enjoyed. "All gold and silver rather turn to dust." Or in Act 4, they say, "Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Though thy worldly task hast done, home art gone, and taken thy wages. Golden lads and girls all must, as a chimney sweepers, come to dust." That language is just so powerful. I loved it. I thought that those are, again, just great examples of Shakespeare's writing style, and they're very much evidenced in this play. But like I said, I think on account of the tone, and then maybe because of the subject matter and the fact that it is supposedly based in antiquity, and there's, I mean, at least it is, claimed to be based in Celtic Great Britain, but it feels very Elizabethan in most regards, minus the fact that the Romans are the ones that do attack them. But in pretty much every other respect, it feels just like any other Shakespeare play based in his own time period. So all those reasons, I would say, are possible reasons why it's not quite as well known. I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure why it's not well known. That's always a bit of a mystery. I would say I would recommend it for anyone that wants more Shakespeare and they are specifically looking for a lesser known Shakespeare, and they do want a tragedy, at least tone wise. Now, if you want a tragedy that still has a pretty happy ending, or at least, like I said, a good sense of reconciliation, then even better. But if you are looking for a true Shakespearean tragedy, you're not going to find that here in the same way that you would find with Macbeth or Hamlet. I wouldn't recommend this to anyone that is just looking for more Shakespeare and they're not quite ready to get into his lesser known stuff, because I'm confident there's still going to be a lot more other plays that you probably are not familiar with if you're still trying to get to know Shakespeare. Just off the top of my head, if you haven't read the Henry IV Part 1 and 2 or Henry V, I always recommend those as go-tos for people that aren't super familiar with Shakespeare, but they definitely want to read or listen or watch a little more Shakespeare. Those would be my first go-tos. But I do think this is still, just like any Shakespeare, it is definitely worth your time if you're willing to put the effort into trying to understand it. And in this case, because you're not familiar with the storyline, I do think that there's room to appreciate the storyline on top of trying to decipher the language, which is always a challenge, and I think one of the best parts of trying to get to know any Shakespeare work. Of course, I want to know what you guys think about this play. Please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.